Life in Nelson's Time, the Midshipman Story. This narrative is proudly brought to you by Polly Speaks For You. At Polly Speaks For You, we are committed to empowering individuals, especially those with disabilities or learning challenges, through innovative text-to-speech and voice recognition technology. Polly Speaks For You is more than just software. It's a tool for self-expression, connecting people with the world in meaningful ways. By blending the richness of history with cutting-edge technology, Polly Speaks For You demonstrates that every voice, whether preserving the past or shaping the future, has the potential to inspire. While we strive to make the story engaging, our primary focus is on storytelling itself. The visuals are secondary. We're showcasing the remarkable capabilities of text-to-speech software that bring these stories to life. Chapter 1. The Call to the Sea. The journey began with a sense of excitement that filled the heart of young Thomas Farrington. At 13, his life in Cornwall seemed small in comparison to the vast sea. His father, a former sailor, had shared tales of naval exploits, where honor was earned not through wealth, but through courage and duty. His mother had resisted the idea of her son joining the Navy, but Thomas's mind was made up. On the day he boarded the Victory, he looked back one final time at his home, knowing it would be years before he saw it again. The ship loomed before him like a beast of steel and timber, its towering masts and billowing sails imposing, yet thrilling. As he stood in line with other midshipmen, his heart pounded with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The Victory, a symbol of Britain's strength, was now his home. Chapter 2. The Routine of a Midshipman. August 4th, 1797. The first days aboard the Victory were filled with drills and hard labor. The older sailors barked orders at him, and Thomas quickly learned the difference between a good sailor and a bad one. He had to master the ropes, learn how to work with the crew, and memorize countless orders that came in quick succession. Midshipmen like him were expected to assist officers with various duties, including carrying messages, observing the crew's work, and reporting to the captain. One of the more difficult aspects of life aboard was the constant motion of the ship, the creaking of the wood as it cut through the waves. Every task, whether it was scrubbing the decks or delivering reports, had to be done swiftly and efficiently. In the evenings, Thomas would retire to his quarters, his body sore from the day's labor. He'd stare out at the dark sea, wondering what the future held. Chapter 3. The First Battle. October 21st, 1797. It wasn't long before Thomas's world was shaken by the roar of cannons and the sight of sails unfurling in the distance. The first engagement of his career came unexpectedly when they encountered a French frigate off the coast of Spain. The crew scrambled to prepare the ship for battle. Thomas was stationed in the foremast, ready to assist the gunners. The orders came swiftly from the officers. Fire! The cannons belched fire and smoke, and the Victory surged forward with a violent motion that sent Thomas stumbling across the deck. He watched in awe as the cannons fired, the sheer force of it shaking the ship to its core. This was his first real taste of battle. As the enemy frigate struggled to maintain its course, Thomas could see the faces of the men around him. Some were calm, while others were pale with fear. His own heart raced, but he focused on the task at hand. The battle ended quickly, with the French vessel surrendering. It was a victory for Britain, but the sense of relief was mixed with an unsettling realization. War, even on the sea, was not a clean affair. Chapter 4. Letters from Home. November 12th, 1797. Between battles and endless drills, Thomas received his first letter from home. It was from his mother, written with love and worry. She spoke of William's illness and asked for news of his health. Thomas could almost hear her voice as he read the words, and for the first time, he felt the deep pang of homesickness. Dearest Thomas, I hope this letter finds you well. William's condition grows worse each day, and I find myself praying for your safe return. Your father insists you are where you belong, but I cannot help but worry. I keep hearing of the battles and skirmishes between the English and the French. Please, my dear boy, write to me more often. I need to know you are well. With all my love, your mother. Thomas carefully folded the letter, tucking it into his jacket pocket. It was hard to keep his mind focused on the duties ahead when all he wanted was to return home and see his family. The sea, once a dream of adventure, was now a vast expanse of uncertainty. Chapter 5: The Storm. December 5th, 1797. The Victory sailed through rough seas that winter. On one particularly violent night, the ship was struck by a powerful storm. The sky was black as pitch, and the wind howled in fury, ripping through the sails. Waves crashed over the deck, and the ship seemed to tilt dangerously. Midshipmen like Thomas were ordered to the rigging to help manage the sails, and the crew worked feverishly to prevent the ship from capsizing. It was during the storm that Thomas first saw Admiral Nelson, his figure silhouetted against the flashing lightning. Nelson stood on the quarterdeck, unfazed by the tempest, shouting commands as if it were a calm day. His coolness under pressure left a lasting impression on Thomas. "We are men of the sea," Nelson shouted as the ship rocked violently. "Fear nothing." For Thomas, that moment was a revelation. It was not the safety that mattered. It was the courage to face danger head-on. The storm passed, but the memories stayed with him. Chapter 6: The Battle of the Nile. August 1st, 1798. The engagement at the Battle of the Nile was Thomas's first true test. The French fleet, under Admiral Brueys, was anchored in Aboukir Bay when the British forces, led by Admiral Nelson, sailed in under the cover of darkness. The battle was ferocious, and the Victory was at the heart of the action. Thomas was again stationed at the foremast, but this time the noise and chaos of battle overwhelmed him. Cannon fire echoed across the bay, and the roar of the guns was deafening. Men were shouting, some calling for help, others simply swearing in fear. Thomas's hands trembled as he helped load the cannons. The heat was unbearable, the deck slick with blood, and the air thick with the acrid smoke of gunpowder. In the chaos, Thomas caught a glimpse of Nelson, his figure standing tall despite the carnage around him. A cannonball struck nearby, but Nelson did not flinch. As the battle raged on, Nelson's orders were clear and calm, his voice steady in the storm. By the end of the day, the French fleet had been decisively defeated. It was a great victory for Britain, but the cost was high. Chapter 7: A Letter from Nelson. August 10th, 1798. After the Battle of the Nile, Victory remained in the Mediterranean, keeping watch over the seas. Thomas, now battle-hardened, had earned the respect of his peers. It was then that he received a letter from Admiral Nelson himself, a rare honor for a young midshipman. Midshipman Farrington, you have shown great courage in the face of battle. Your actions during the engagement at the Nile have not gone unnoticed. It is rare for a boy of your years to display such resolve under fire. Keep this spirit, and you will rise far in the ranks. Horatio Nelson. Thomas read the letter in disbelief. It was a moment that filled him with pride. He kept the letter close, tucking it into his chest pocket where it remained as a reminder of what he had achieved. It wasn't just the victory at sea that mattered. It was the honor of being recognized by the greatest admiral Britain had ever known. Chapter 8: Reflections and Reminiscences. November 1799. The years had passed, and Thomas had grown into a man aboard the Victory. He had witnessed the brutal realities of naval warfare, the loss of comrades, the constant threat of death, and the sacrifices that came with serving on the front lines. He had seen men rise to heroism, only to fall in the blink of an eye. Yet, through it all, he had learned to adapt and survive. He sat on the deck one evening, gazing out at the horizon, where the sun dipped below the waves in a blaze of red and gold. He thought back on the days when the sea had seemed like an adventure. Now, it was a place of duty, a place where the line between life and death was as thin as the rope that held the sails. But there was no turning back now. He had made his choice, and though the journey was far from over, Thomas knew that his story, like the Victory's, would one day be written in the annals of history. Chapter 9: The Final Voyage. October 21st, 1805. The Battle of Trafalgar loomed on the horizon, and the tension aboard the Victory was palpable. Thomas had risen through the ranks, now an experienced officer, but his heart was heavy with the knowledge that this battle could be the end. Admiral Nelson, too, knew this could be his final engagement. As the fleet prepared to sail into battle, he called his officers together for one final address. "England expects that every man will do his duty," Nelson said, his voice carrying across the ship. Thomas felt a swell of pride as the words sank in. This was it, the final battle, the defining moment. The battle was fierce, the sea painted with fire and smoke. Thomas fought alongside his men, leading with the same resolve he had learned years earlier under Nelson's watchful eye. But as the battle raged on, a shot rang out, and Nelson fell, struck by a French marksman. The news spread like wildfire. The greatest admiral Britain had ever known was dead. Yet his legacy lived on in the victory that followed. The French fleet was shattered, and Britain's dominance of the seas was secured. A letter home, November 25, 1805. With the battle behind him, Thomas wrote one final letter to his mother. His words were filled with sorrow and triumph, a reflection of the man he had become. "Dearest mother, I hope this letter finds you well. The battle at Trafalgar was won, but at great cost. Our beloved Admiral Nelson has passed, and the world feels a little smaller without him. I wish you could have seen the courage he inspired in all of us. It is because of men like him that Britain stands tall, and it is because of men like you that I continue to fight. I will return home, God willing. Until then, please keep me in your thoughts. With all my love, your son, Midshipman Thomas Farrington." The fate of Thomas Farrington. After the Battle of Trafalgar, where Thomas Farrington had witnessed the death of Admiral Nelson and the destruction of the French fleet, his life on the Victory became a mix of reflection and quiet resolve. The victory at Trafalgar secured British naval dominance for many years, but it also marked the end of an era. The loss of Nelson was deeply felt by all aboard, and Thomas, who had come to view Nelson as a personal hero, found the absence of the great admiral to be a profound blow to his morale. Yet, in the face of tragedy, he remained committed to his duty, promotion, and continued service. In the years following Trafalgar, Thomas continued to serve with distinction in the Royal Navy. His actions at the Battle of the Nile and Trafalgar had earned him the respect of his fellow officers, and he was promoted several times, eventually rising to the rank of lieutenant. As Britain continued its naval campaigns, Thomas found himself posted to different ships, taking on increasingly important roles, often supervising the training of younger midshipmen. He became known as a fair yet firm officer, respected by the crew for his leadership and calm under pressure. He spent time in the Mediterranean, where the British fleet continued to engage in naval skirmishes with the French, and later, he was sent to the Caribbean, where he fought against privateers and defended British merchant shipping. Throughout these years, he kept a detailed diary filled with accounts of his battles, his personal growth, and the hardships of life at sea. He never stopped thinking of his mother and the letters he would send home, though his visits were few and far between due to the demands of naval service. A quiet end to his service. By 1810, after nearly 2 decades of service, Thomas's health began to deteriorate. The toll of endless voyages, the harsh conditions aboard ships, and the physical demands of naval life had begun to weigh heavily on him. His once vibrant energy had been replaced by chronic illnesses, likely a result of exposure to the sea and the frequent storms, as well as the harsh, crowded conditions aboard naval vessels. He was granted leave in 1812 to return home to Cornwall, where he hoped the fresh air and slower pace of life would restore his health. After being discharged from active duty, Thomas settled into a quiet life in a small cottage by the sea, far removed from the battles and the bustle of the Navy. Though his health never fully returned, he found peace in the quiet of his coastal retreat. Reflections on his life. As Thomas grew older, he reflected on his years at sea. He had been part of some of the most important naval battles in British history, had witnessed moments of extraordinary courage, and had earned a place among the ranks of those who had secured Britain's place as a dominant naval power. Yet he never sought the recognition that others did. He was content with the knowledge that he had played his part. One of his final letters, written in 1822 to an old shipmate, Captain James Hayward, revealed much about his state of mind. "My dear James, I often find myself staring out to sea, reflecting on all that we fought for. The battles we fought and the friends we've lost. Nelson, God bless him, still stands as the greatest man I have ever known. His words still echo in my heart. The work we did in the service of our country seems so distant now, but I take comfort knowing we did it right. Though my body is weary, my heart is at peace. I think of my time on the Victory with fondness and pride. Those were the days when the world felt as though it was waiting for us to shape it. I often wonder if we did enough, but I find that the answer lies in the waves themselves, constantly moving forward, never looking back. Farewell, my old friend, and may the sea always be kind to you. Yours, Thomas Farrington. Legacy and memory. Thomas Farrington passed away in 1830, quietly in his sleep, at the age of 46. He had lived through a transformative period in British naval history and had played a small but significant part in shaping it. His name, while not as famous as that of Admiral Nelson or the other great naval heroes of the time, lived on in the hearts of those who had served with him. Years later, his letters and diaries were discovered by his grandsons, who had heard the stories of their grandfather's bravery and adventures. The records of his service were preserved in the National Maritime Museum, where they now offer a glimpse into the life of a midshipman who had served on the Victory during the most pivotal moments of Britain's naval history. Epilogue: the hero who lived among us. While Thomas Farrington's name may not have been carved into the annals of history alongside Nelson's, his legacy endures through the generations of sailors who followed in his footsteps. A quiet man, a dedicated officer, and a humble hero, Thomas Farrington's life was a testament to the values of duty, courage, and honor that defined the era of naval warfare in which he lived. The man who had once been a young midshipman on the Victory had left behind a life well lived, and in the hearts of those who knew him, his story would never be forgotten. If you're enjoying this story, please remember to hit like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue creating content that educates and empowers. To learn more about South Africa's leading accessibility software and to support our dyslexic-friendly initiative, visit www.polispeaks4u.co.za. Drop a comment if you want more information. Thank you for watching this video.